June 1991, Medellín, Colombia. Pablo Escobar surrendered himself to the Colombian government and finally accepted imprisonment to avoid extradition to the U.S. That same day, he stepped foot into his new reality behind bars, in Envigado, just south of Medellín. However, Escobar himself both designed and controlled the luxurious prison. And in this video, we'll tell you how he continued to run his criminal operation from his jacuzzi. Yeah, he made sure to have one of those as well. But first, let's take a look at where it all started. The making of a mastermind. Born in the Colombian city of Rio Negro, Antioquia, Escobar's early life seemed unremarkable. His father was a peasant farmer and his mother was a school teacher. But from a young age, Escobar harbored a desire to elevate himself above his humble origins. As a teenager, he dabbled in petty crime, stealing tombstones and selling fake diplomas. But it wasn't long before he moved on to bigger things, like stealing cars and smuggling stereo equipment. These small-time offenses were just the beginning. Soon he found himself caught up in a world of drugs, where the rewards were greater but the risks even higher. In the mid-1970s, Escobar helped create the infamous Medellín cartel, which would go on to dominate the global cocaine trade. Alongside other powerful men like the Ochoa brothers, he built a criminal empire that seemed invincible. But even as his wealth and influence grew, so did his notoriety. Pablo Escobar was known as a ruthless drug lord, willing to do whatever it took to maintain his grip on power. At the peak of his power, he believed himself to be untouchable, a god among men, as he watched his wealth and influence grow unchecked. And by the mid-1980s, Escobar was worth an estimated $25 billion. He had everything money could buy, including a sprawling estate called Hacienda Nápoles, complete with a zoo, artificial lakes, and even an airstrip. And his wealth was on full display with private planes, luxurious homes, and extravagant parties. In the late 1980s, he reportedly offered to pay off his country's debt of $10 billion in exchange for exemption from being extradited to the United States. And when his family was on the run, he burnt a staggering $2 million to keep his daughter warm. Yet for all his riches, Escobar was never truly safe. His enemies were always lurking, waiting for their chance to strike. The impending collapse. In the early 1990s, the king of coke was at his wit's end. He was on the run and his enemies were hunting for blood. A vigilante group known as Los Pepes, a name derived from the phrase "persecuted by Pablo Escobar," was relentlessly hunting him down, leading to the demise of over 300 of his associates and family members. But their wrath was not the only threat to his life. A bitter war with his longtime rivals, the Cali cartel, was in full swing, ready to unleash its fury at any moment. He also witnessed his peers like Carlos Leder extradited to the United States, the Ochoa brothers surrendering to serve jail time in Colombian prisons, and others like Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, aka El Mexicano, meeting their end in violent police encounters. And so Escobar knew that the possibility of him being arrested and extradited to the US loomed over him like a storm cloud. And that was the thing he loathed the most. But the final straw came when his own daughter, Manuela, was injured in a brutal bombing of his own home. It was a cruel reminder that in the world of drug trafficking, no one's safe from the reach of violence and terror. So Escobar finally decided that he was better off entering the secure embrace of the authorities. And what do you do when the most wanted man in your country, who also happens to be one of the wealthiest and most powerful people on the planet, wants to cut a deal, offering to surrender on his own terms? You say yes, no questions asked, even if it was the strangest and most outlandish deal in the history of criminality. Negotiating his own arrest. In 1991, Escobar had a proposal for the Colombian authorities. He told them he would give himself up and would be willing to be prosecuted for how many years they wanted to give him. Yet he would spend all of that time in his own prison, which he would build as he saw fit. I mean, haven't you ever wondered why he was smiling in his mugshot? But being housed in a prison of his own design wasn't Escobar's only demand. He also wanted to give the right to choose his guards and where the prison would be built. He was a family man through and through, so he wanted a location that would allow him a direct sightline to his family's home. He also ordered the installation of a specially designed telescope so he could see his family members while talking with them on the phone. Surprisingly, or perhaps not, the Colombian government saw they had no choice but to cave to the demands of the most notorious criminal mastermind in the world. In a country plagued by corruption and violence, they knew their power and reputation would continue to crumble as long as Escobar roamed free. And so a deal was struck in secret, one that would not only bring an end to Escobar's reign of terror, as they thought, but also to the costly pursuit of the cartel boss. Escobar was sentenced to 5 years, yet, of course, entering prison was not an act of defeat for the kingpin. No, it was a strategic move, a way to protect himself not just from his enemies, who were lurking by and closing in, but also from what he was most afraid of: extradition to the United States. He feared a system where prison guards and judges could not be easily bribed. For him, the choice was clear: better a grave in Colombia than a cell in the US. Adding insult to injury, the Colombian government had to add an amendment to the constitution that banned citizens' extraditions in June of 1991. Escobar kept up his end of the bargain and turned himself in a few days afterwards. And then President Cesar Gaviria declared that the Narcos treatment will not be any different from what the law demands. But little did anyone know that the reality of Escobar's imprisonment would be far from what the law demanded. Hotel Escobar. June 19, 1991. The notorious drug lord was whisked away in a helicopter to the mountaintop where his prison awaited. He bid farewell to his family and sauntered past the heavily armed guards, through the towering 10-foot-high barbed wire fences, and into the compound where he signed his surrender document. But what lay beyond the concrete facade was a world of opulence, power, and unfettered freedom. The prison was nothing like any other. It was built to his specifications, complete with luxurious amenities and staff of his choosing. The appearance of punishment was nothing but a smokescreen, for Pablo Escobar was living the life of a king. The prison was named La Catedral, but it was no sanctuary for the morally righteous. Instead, it was a place of vice, with a swimming pool, a soccer field, a bar, and even a disco. Escobar's prison resembled a 5-star resort more than a place of punishment. As if that weren't enough, the prison was also a hub for criminal activity. Escobar continued to conduct his drug empire from the inside, thanks to the monthly supply runs that brought in everything from drugs and weapons to working girls and cash. He hosted wild parties with celebrities and beauty queens, and even had his own kitchen staffed with some of the best chefs in Colombia. Escobar's influence extended even beyond the walls of his luxurious prison. His family came over 3 or 4 times a week, along with the Colombian national soccer team and even other convicted criminals on the run. Escobar's son recounted his own memories at La Catedral, particularly the collection of James Bond movies that he would watch with his father on a 29-inch Sony television. Escobar was in complete control of his own little kingdom, far away from the justice he deserved, while the Colombian government foolishly looked the other way. The turning point. Just because Escobar was behind a fenced wall didn't mean that the network of drug trafficking stopped. Instead, the prison became the new HQ of his business empire, a fact that would eventually embarrass the government into action, and the days of luxury living in the cathedral were soon to be numbered for Escobar. The notorious drug lord, known for his brazen and ruthless tactics, pushed the limits of his so-called imprisonment until it all came crashing down. His ego led him to believe he was invincible and could commit heinous acts while in custody, and so he did. From the prison, he organized kidnappings or killings of almost 24 associates. 4 of them were even killed right here in La Catedral. And so the government decided they had seen enough, and it was time to put an end to this farce of a prison. Escobar was to be transferred to a military prison, stripped of his opulent surroundings and his power. But Escobar and his loyal henchmen were not going down without a fight. When the chief of prisons and the deputy justice secretary arrived to the cathedral to apprehend the drug lord, they were met with heavily armed resistance. The stage was set for a bloody showdown, with Escobar and his men unwilling to give up their luxurious prison and their leader's grip on power. One of his associates, named Popeye, pointed a submachine gun at him, telling him there were hostages and they were going to leave La Catedral in body bags. However, before they could kill him, a gunfight broke out with the Colombian National Army, who stormed in to rescue the hostages. In the middle of the chaos, Escobar managed to flee the scene through an escape route he had built into the facility during its construction and melted into the mountain. However, to this day, exactly how he was able to do so remains an open question. And once again, the notorious drug lord was at large after only spending 13 months in his palace of a prison. Escobar managed to evade the authorities for months, making a mockery of Colombia's so-called justice. The government was desperate and had no choice but to turn to the U.S. for help. In response, the U.S. Delta Force and Navy SEALs joined together with a 600-member Special Ops unit of the National Police of Colombia known as the Search Block to hunt down the elusive criminal. Rumors have it that they also turned to Los Pepes and fed them with information so they could carry out their extrajudicial killings. But the situation was far from straightforward. Escobar was a master of deception and had an army of loyal minions at his disposal. He was constantly on the move, staying in different safe houses every night and speaking on the phone for no more than 3 minutes at a time. A staggering $6 million was offered for his capture, but he remained elusive. Finally, on his 44th birthday, Escobar let his guard down, allegedly indulging in cake, wine, and marijuana. And he made one fatal mistake, staying too long on the phone with his son. But I think we all know that this wasn't a mistake. He knew what he was doing, and so his joy was short-lived. The following day, his hideout was discovered, and a fierce gunfight broke out as the Colombian forces raided the building. Escobar managed to escape to the roof with one of his bodyguards, but it was too late. In a bloody confrontation, he was fatally shot. Some say he took his own life, but others believe justice was finally served. The end of the notorious kingpin had come, but the scars he left on Colombia and the world would never truly heal.